I saw Jordan Peterson tweeting, well, here we go. Atheistic hedonists unconsciously worship Pan. And I thought, what an odd thing to say. I would think if you're an atheist, you don't believe in any gods, you don't worship anybody. But if you are, why Pan, right? Like, what's the, it's so confusing in so many ways. And then it really started to hit me that the more you look at Peterson's own religious beliefs, the more confusing it gets. So take, for example, this.
God is that which calls you to make the appropriate sacrifices and calls you on it when you don't. And try to escape that and see what happens. We know perfectly well, that that's a pathway to hell. And you might say, I don't believe in hell. And I would say, that means you don't know anything.
So that sounds to me like a guy who's pretty sure there's a God, right? I mean, I don't know. First blush.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it astounds me that the state of, the country of Turkey let him do that there. But
I don't know. I mean, here, let's think about it this way. Jake, if you had to guess, like, I think we could ease our way into this with a political example. So think about like Antifa. Jordan Peterson doesn't like Antifa one bit, right? He's very, very opposed to that. And he thinks they do a lot of bad things. So if you had to guess, what would be his explanation of why they do bad things?
If I had to guess based on no information at all, just based on why it would be reasonable probably, that they're overly left wing, that they're maybe kind of destructive. They believe in breaking down the system instead of having a more conservative understanding of how family structure should work alongside, like, aligning with Peterson's vision of the world. I mean, that would be
okay.
Would that be reasonable?
Yeah, that is an extremely reasonable guess, but I believe we have some video evidence here. So let's see what he actually says.
I wanted to ask you about based on your knowledge, your background, your clinical experience, what is the psychology of this mob violence? When I see it like I don't even recognize some of these. They seem animalistic, is what I mean.
They're worse than animals. They're worse than animals because animals, they just kill to eat. Human beings, they have a twist in them that makes them far worse than animals when they really get going. Well, I think you really want to know what I think? I think it's revenge against God for the crime of being. That's really what I think. It's Cain and Abel. It's like, oh, Abel's your guy, eh? God, how about if I take him out in the field and beat him to death? How do you feel about that? All my sacrifices went unrewarded. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's what it is at the bottom of the hell of things.
I can never watch that clip enough. That's his when he's his Oscar clip, when he's nominated and they show the clip. That's his Oscar winning clip. He actually is a good actor. I mean, I think he really believes it, maybe, and that's what makes a good actor. But I love watching that clip.
Yeah, right. His method. Yeah, I mean, this is a man who is capable of moving himself to tears at a moment's notice, thinking about how his political enemies are angry at God for the crime of being. And if you've ever read 12 Rules for Life, you know that being has a capital B at the beginning of it, which is some weird tribute to Heidegger, Dasein, but forget that. Last two clips. If you don't believe in hell, you don't know anything. The bad people who do bad things are, whatever their alleged political or cultural grievances, are really just angry at God. This sounds like some very intense, like this, this sounds like the kind of thing that somebody would say in a sermon in the kind of church where somebody might start like speaking in tongues, and like that would be a totally normal and expected part of the service. So it sounds like the guy has some pretty intense religious beliefs. But then, and I know we've played this before, but it's okay. We're just going to do a shorter version of this one right now. And I don't think seeing it once is enough to sort of soak up the full profundity of it. You'd start to look at his pronouncements over the years, and you see some odd things. Like here is Dr. Peterson with fellow friend of the show, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin's show. And Dave has asked him about a minute before. We're not going to play this part, but Dave has asked him about a minute before, essentially, like, give the man credit where credit's due. Dave Rubin is not, I think, very bright or very principled or very, I don't know, come up with some other adjectives. He's probably not very much of any of those things either. But in this case, he's trying to ask a good question. Essentially, what he's just asked is, hey, Ben and Jordan, you guys do a lot of God talk, but what do you actually mean? Keep it simple. And I swear to God, he did say keep it simple before this. There's about a minute of meandering up until this point. I'm going to spare you, but let's just watch the key part of it.
Well, let's say you decide to follow the best leader in a battle. Well, then you don't die. Like, he might get all the women, but you don't die. So at least you're still in the game. Yeah. And it might be the same if you're following the greatest hunter. And the greatest hunter wouldn't be the person who is best at bringing down the game. It would be the person who is best at bringing down the game and sharing it and organizing the next hunt and all of that, right? And so men will organize themselves into groups and privilege certain men, and that puts them ahead in the reproductive hierarchy. And so what that means to some degree is that there's a spirit of masculinity that's shaping the entire structure of human evolutionary history. That's what that means. And then I think, okay, well, that might just be a biological epiphenomenon. And so it would be a spirit it's the spirit of positive masculinity that manifests itself across epochal ages, millions of years perhaps, and it actually has shaped our consciousness, actually. And so you can think about that as a figure, and it would be the figure that emerges. It's like the essential spirit of all the great men who defined what greatness constituted. That's a spirit. Okay, now that's a purely biological explanation. You could say, well, that's God for all intents and purposes. You might have an image of that built right into you. Even the sense that you can experience something divine and paternal might be merely a reflection of that evolutionary process. So that would be a biologically reductive argument for the existence of what we experience as God. But then there's another possibility too, which is that that's actually reflective of a deeper metaphysical reality that has to do with the nature of consciousness itself. And I would say that I think that's true. Is I believe the biological case, and I believe the biologically reductive case, but I don't think that exhausts it. I think that there's a metaphysical layer underneath that the biology is a genuine reflection of. And that's the sort of the macrocosm above and the microcosm below. That we are really reflective, including in our consciousness, of something about the structure of reality itself. And that might involve whatever it is that God is.
Okay, so pop quiz. What does Jordan Peterson actually believe about God?
Whatever it is, I'm not on enough hard drugs to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I was talking about this with Stefan Bertrand yesterday. This is Revolution, and I maybe somewhat unkindly said it sort of sounded like Peterson was just coming down from a really intense ketamine experience, and he was trying to sum it up and not doing a very good job. But as far as I can tell from the end of it, he says, okay, here's this. I mean, I think his grasp on evolutionary biology is not perfect, but let's put that aside because that's not what we're talking about right now. He's got this purely, as he says, reductive, biological, naturalistic explanation for why people believe in God. But then in the last 30 seconds, he remembers that's not supposed to be his position. And he says, well, but there's like a metaphysical layer underneath that, but all he could bring himself to say about the metaphysical layer is that there might be something about the structure. It might reflect something about the structure of reality that might have something to do with, this is an exact quote, whatever it is that God is. It's like, wait a second, what does he believe? Now, here's the good news. Last year, we have a clip of him directly answering the question, do you believe in God?
You know that there are central doctrines to Christianity, like the crucifixion, the ascension, the resurrection, and all the above, right? These are doctrines. All types of Christians will agree with it. Catholics will agree with it. Eastern Orthodox and Protestants. All of them will say you must believe in these doctrines as happening. You cannot believe in them as symbol. You cannot believe. So the reason why this actually is...
So when I hear something like that, then the question that arises for me is, what do you mean happening? And so let me just unpack that a little bit. So I did a lecture last night at the Apollo on the story of Cain and Abel.
Yes.
And one of the things that I proposed was that not only did that story happen, but it's always happening.
Yes.
It always happened. It's happening right now, and it's always going to happen into the future. And so then when I look at a story like Cain and Abel, I think, well, the question, did that happen, begs the question, what do you mean by happen? Because when you are dealing with fundamental realities and you pose a question, you have to understand that the reality of the concepts of your question, when you're digging that deep, are just as questionable as what you're questioning. You know, so people say to me, do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean except belief in God. And I think, no, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks, we don't really know what any of those things mean.
This is like for the average Peterson fan. I mean, the average one that's like over 50, right? Because it's probably like under 18 and over 50, as we've discussed. It's like their wife asking, like, "Did you cheat on me?" You know, and you're like, "Did
you did? What do you mean I? What do
you cheat?" We have to define all of these words.
I don't know what any. Look, babe, we're going to have to spend an hour on each of these to even begin to get down to the fundamental brass tacks of this important question.
Yeah, exactly. It's how dare you even ask me that? That was one of the worst dodges I've maybe ever seen. I don't know what you think, Ben and Andy.
I would say the worst dodge I've seen since Bill Clinton in 1998 when he asked what the definition of is. Same energy.
Yeah. I mean, at least he was only pretending not to know what one word meant. And this is interesting. So, you know, one of the things, so when I talk about in the essay and when I talked about the conversation with Stefan on TIR, and, you know, we don't have to get into the whole thing here. I want to move on, but like, is if you actually look at Peterson's stated views about truth, he has this kind of weird version of something like pragmatism about truth, although I'm reluctant to even call it that because I think what he believes is just much dumber, frankly, than like what the classical pragmatists believed. But he, you could listen to this like 2-hour podcast conversation he did several years ago with Sam Harris. Which,
I'll be straight from
there.
this.
You'll definitely be doing that as soon as the episode is over. Yeah. If you really want to know, you can listen to that. Look, I don't like Sam Harris. I think he is wrong about a really impressive array of subjects, from, you know, torture to Palestine to free will to metaethics to airport security to, you know, like it just a lot of stuff, right? We actually did an episode once that was literally called Sam Harris is Wrong About Everything, which, you know, is an overstatement, but, you know, captures something. And I have never felt as much sympathy for Sam Harris as I did while I was listening to this conversation, because for so much of it, they're getting hung up on this thing about truth. And Peterson has this weird view that something is true if it like aids in the survival or flourishing of the human race. And Harris is trying to ask him all these obvious follow-up questions, like, okay, if there's like a, you know, chemical weapons lab where they have an accident and something spills out of the water supply and it wipes out the entire human race. Does that mean the theory of chemistry they were working with isn't true? And it is like what I say in the essays. It's like 2 hours of listening to like a harried adjunct professor trying and failing to explain something to the world's most confused undergraduate. But like that view about truth should give Peterson a way to just say, yes, God exists, full stop, right? But he never quite does, right? He always says all this weird shit instead, because I think that even though officially he represents, like his official position is he rejects what's called the correspondence theory of truth, the idea that, statements are true if the facts they describe are the way the statement says it is, right? In favor of some kind of weird pragmatism. I think in his heart, he does kind of know that he doesn't believe in God the way that he believes in, whatever, that the crimes of Stalin happened or whatever. Like, pick your favorite thing that, you think that Peterson would obviously believe. And if you actually look at this Twitter thread, right, that, hey, atheistic hedonists unconsciously worship Pan, next tweet, or Priapus, family-friendly podcast. I'm not going to explain this one, but look it up. Implicitly worship, if you must. Do you get it yet? My favorite tweet. Do you get it yet? It's never, do you believe in God? It's always, which God do you worship? Consciously or unconsciously. And all I could think is, my dude, like, you are every bit as much of an atheist as I am. Like, the sense in which you're saying everybody believes in or worships a God is like everybody acts in a way that reminds you of that God. It's like, you might as well say, it's never, do you believe Hogwarts is real? It's always, which Harry Potter house would you belong to, right? Do you care about, bravery, Gryffindor, I don't know, loyalty, Hufflepuff, whatever the other ones are, like it is literally the equivalent. But the man could not get past his culture war. He is addicted to it. I'm not going to make an addiction joke here because it'd be in bad taste, but it's like, the man cannot wean himself from the culture war. So for culture war reasons, he has to go after atheists. But, you're not fooling anybody, Dr. Peterson, and you don't need to act this way. You can be true to yourself. There's room for all in Pan's congregation. That is where I'll leave this. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.